You're reading from this passage and chapter 14 this evening. Operation Overlord. This was the code name for the Battle of Normandy, the Allied operation that launched the successful liberation of German-occupied Western Europe during World War II. The operation was launched on the 6th of June, 1944, what we also commonly call as D-Day. A 1,200-plane airborne assault preceded an amphibious assault involving more than 5,000 vessels. Nearly 160,000 troops crossed the English Channel on June 6th, and more than 2 million Allied troops were in France by the end of August. It takes brave men and women to sacrifice themselves to the horrors of war. And this weekend we celebrate Memorial Day in honor of those soldiers, but tonight I would like to talk about a particular battle, the battle that we all face in our lives. That is a spiritual battle. There's a real battle in 1 Samuel 13 and 14 that has some fantastic spiritual applications. So if you'll walk with me tonight through these two chapters, we'll see how Saul handles things that go on. We'll see how his son Jonathan handles this battle. And we'll learn something about how we can fight our own battles today. 1 Samuel chapter 13, we're going to start with verses 1 through 4. The lesson here is to know who your enemies are. Saul was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 42 years over Israel. Now Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel, of which 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel, while 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gibeah of Benjamin. But he sent away the rest of the people, each to his tent. Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Gibeah, and the Philistines heard of it. Then Saul blew the trumpet throughout the land, saying, "Let the Hebrews hear." All Israel heard the news that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel had become odious to the Philistines. They didn't like them. The people were then summoned to Saul at Gilgal. In this passage, this first 4 verses, the Israelites attacked. They went after them. And our enemies quite often are fine if we sit there, let's live at peace. But the Israelites said, we need to attack these Philistines, so they did just that. We ourselves don't struggle against the world the way the Israelites did with the Philistines. Ephesians 6:12 says that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. But our spiritual enemies have the same attitude as the Philistines. As long as we are weak and are quiet, they're fine with us. But what did the Israelites do? They said, we're going to go to war, and so they attacked the Philistines. We've got to be willing to go to war with who our enemies are. We need to battle them in such a way that we can bring more to Christ. That's what we should be about. But if peace with the devil is more important to you than victory in the Lord, you will often be defeated and put off to the side. Verses 5 through 7. Things begin to be discouraging here. The Philistines are coming together. They are assembling, verses 5 through 7. Now the Philistines assembled to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people like the sand which is on the seashore in abundance. And they came up and camped in Michmash east of Bethaven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, for the people were hard pressed, then the people hid themselves in caves, in thickets, in cliffs, in cellars, and in pits. They ran away. Also some of the Hebrews crossed the Jordan into the land of Gad and Gilead. But as for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. So the Hebrews struck the Philistines, and the Philistines gathered their armies together, and they became outnumbered rather quickly. And they saw the challenge that was before them, and they said, I can't take this. And many left, many fled. They went and hid in caves, hid in various places because they were outnumbered. And so the discouragement settles in. Verse 8. Now he waited 7 days according to the appointed time set by Samuel. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. Samuel being the prophet. But Saul said, Bring to me the burnt offering and the peace offering. And he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him and to greet him. But Samuel said, What have you done? And Saul said, Because I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the appointed days, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash. Therefore I said, Now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not asked the favor of the Lord, so I forced myself and offered the burnt offering. Saul did something he wasn't supposed to do. It was something that was supposed to have been left to Samuel, for him to take care of. Samuel said to Saul, You have acted foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God which commanded you, for now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not endure. They started a battle. They thought they could win. Things have gotten bad. The people of the Philistine side are more numerous than they. Saul tries to take things into his own hands. Does it follow what God has told him to be? The Lord has sought out for himself a man after his own heart. And the Lord has appointed him as ruler over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord God commanded you. We continue on with this passage, verses 15 through 18. There's some more movement of the armies, the Philistines trying to get into various places to go at war with the Hebrews. Then we get down to verse 19. Now no blacksmith could be found in all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, Otherwise the Hebrews will make swords or spears. So in these days, when you were perhaps a poor area or a farmer, you didn't maybe have enough money to have swords and shields and that sort of thing. So you would take your farm implements and make them into weapons. It was a common practice of the day. But there were no blacksmiths around. They couldn't do what they wanted to do in order to prepare for the war. So all Israel went down to the Philistines, each to sharpen his plowshare, his mattock, his axe, and his hoe. The charge was 2/3 of a shekel for the plowshares, the mattocks, the forks, and the axes, and to fix the hoes, to turn them into weapons, you see. So it came about on the day of battle that neither sword nor spear was found in the hands of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan. We need weapons. Those who were brave enough to stay said, We need weapons to battle the Philistines. There was none to be found. They couldn't find the weapons. Discouragement, probably the least of their problems. They just simply were not prepared. They were not prepared to fight this battle, and we in our spiritual lives must be prepared. We must know who our enemies are. Not think we can do it all ourselves, but know that God can be there with us and encourage us. So the people did not have the weapons they needed, but they were found with Saul and his son Jonathan. You know, the tools they needed rose to the top, and the only people that could have it were the king and his son. That's all that could even have the weapons. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Michmash. So things aren't good. Things are not good for the Hebrews. They are not prepared. They are discouraged. They thought things were going well. They are not. Maybe you feel the same way in your life, where you try and you give it your all, and then something happens, and you're like, what's going on? Why can't I succeed? Why can't I move forward? Saul here definitely is discouraged. His people are expecting him to lead. He knows they feel this way, and yet he just seems to be failing here. Let's see what happens in chapter 14. Now the day came that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who was carrying his armor, Come and let us cross over to the Philistines' garrison. that is on the other side. But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree, which is in Migron, and the people who were with him were about 600 men. Victory seems impossible. They were vastly outnumbered and greatly surpassed in military technology. Yet Jonathan was bold enough to go over to the Philistine side just to see what the Lord might do. When you're discouraged, when you feel as though you're not prepared, the thing to do is to have faith and be brave in your God. See the war, see the battle that's coming at you, and say, my Lord is bigger than this, and He can help me through it. I wonder if Jonathan remembered Shamgar in Judges chapter 3. After him came Shamgar, the son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad, and he also saved Israel, defeated those Philistines at that time. And I wonder if Jonathan remembers that and says, perhaps I can do the same with the help of God. Jonathan could strengthen himself as well in promises we see in Leviticus 26. It says, but you will chase your enemies and they will fall before you by sword. 5 of you will chase 100, and 100 of you will chase 10,000, and your enemies will fall before you by the sword. Perhaps Jonathan is not afraid of the Philistines. The Philistines should be afraid of him. And you yourself should not be afraid of your enemies, but your enemies should be afraid of your God and what you can do with your faith to reach them and to live the life you are to live on this earth. Verses 6 and 7 of 1 Samuel chapter 14. Then Jonathan said to the young man who was carrying his armor, come and let us cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. Perhaps the Lord will work for us. For the Lord is not restrained to save many by the few. His armor bearers said to him, do all that is in your heart. Turn yourself, and here I am with you, according to your desire. For Jonathan, this was more than a reconnaissance expedition. He wanted to see what God might do through 2 men who trusted Him and stepped out boldly. King Saul was sitting under a pomegranate tree. Something had to be done, and Jonathan was willing to let God use him. Does he know what's going to happen? No, he doesn't. Do you always know what's going to happen? No, you do not. Things can appear scary, but you know that God is behind you, and you know He can do great things if you but have faith in Him and the friends that are around you. This courage that Jonathan exemplifies is wise. Many in Israel probably believed this as a theological truth. Many of us believe today that it is a theological truth, that God is there for us. But few believe it enough to actually do something about it. Jonathan's faith, you see, was demonstrated by his works. He said, God can use us. Let's go and let's see what happens. And he went forth with his armor bearer. The only thing that can be said to restrain God, is there anything that can keep God from doing what He needs to do? Well, Matthew chapter 13, Jesus visited His hometown of Nazareth, and it says this in verse 58, and He did not do many miracles there because of their unbelief. God's there ready to act. God's there ready to bless. God in the New Testament is there ready to heal. But the people had this unbelief. And so Jesus simply went elsewhere. The odds were already against Israel. Did it matter if it was 1,000,000 to 1 or 1,000 to 1? No, it didn't. You see, John, he never read the New Testament, but he definitely had a New Testament attitude when we see Romans chapter 8, if God is for us, who is against us? Who can defeat us? No one can. For even in death we find victory. Victory in the eternal. Whether we win here or lose here perhaps in some ways, our victory is in heaven, waiting there for us. The words from Jonathan's armor-bearer must have cheered Jonathan greatly. And when we step out in faith, encouragement can make all the difference for good, and discouragement can make all the difference for evil. So when you see someone stepping out in faith, perhaps you admire them, but they need you. They need your encouragement. Jonathan was there talking, and his armor-bearer said, "Yes, let's go do it." Someone here needs to lead or perhaps start a new ministry or do something grand for the congregation or for the community, and someone needs to get behind them and say, "Yes, let's go and let's do that." God, you see, was going to use Jonathan, but He wasn't going to use Jonathan alone. We all need that supportive friend that God sends to us, and that friend that, with that encouragement, can make all the difference in our lives. Perhaps you need that friend. Perhaps you are that friend. Either way, you can be encouraged and fight these enormous battles. 1 Samuel chapter 14 and verse 8. Then Jonathan said, "Behold, we will cross over to the men and reveal ourselves to them. If they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand in our place and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up. For the Lord has given them into our hands, and this shall be the sign to us." In his step of faith, Jonathan wanted to know if God was really leading. So he proposed a test based on the response of the Philistine guard. How they answer us, they say one thing, we're not going up. But if they say something else, then we'll go up and then we'll take them, for God has given them to us. Jonathan, you see, showed wisdom and not unbelief. To this point, he does not act on a specific confirmed word from God. We don't know that God told him, "Hey, go do this," but he feels it in his gut, feels it in his heart and in his faith. And he follows bold hope in what perhaps he had hoped for, what we can pray for, you see. Do you pray and then realize that God is answering that prayer even as you stop uttering those words? We need to be more faithful in our prayer and watch for God to answer those. Jonathan essentially does that here. He was humble enough to know that his heart might be wrong on this day, so Jonathan asked God to guide him and to show him what must be done. Verse 11. When both of them revealed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines said, "Behold, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden themselves." Remember, the Hebrews were scattered and they were hiding, and the Philistines thought, well, this is just some more coming up out of the holes. Let's take them for our prisoners, perhaps. So the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor-bearer and said, "Come up to us, and we will tell you something." That's the signal Jonathan asked for. That's the signal Jonathan mentions to his armor-bearer. And Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hands of Israel." It's time. It's time to go to war. We're outnumbered. We're outmatched in our swords, but we can do this with the help of God. Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet with his armor-bearer behind him, and they fell before Jonathan. And his armor-bearer put some to death after him. That first slaughter with Jonathan and his armor-bearer made was about 20 men within about half a furrow in an acre of land. And there was a trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. Who's scared now? Who's scared now? It's not the Israelites. Jonathan and his armor-bearer take out 20 men. And they say, here's what God can do with us. Here's what He can do with you and for you. And now the Philistines, you see, are shaking in their boots. There was a trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. Even the garrison and the raiders trembled. And the earth quaked, so that it became a great trembling. Jonathan was prompted by faith. And it's significant to mention that he did not demand to know the whole battle plan from God in advance. He's infiltrating where the Philistines are, and he's going into their encampment, not knowing what's going to happen, but tells his armor bearer, hey, here's what's going to happen. It's going to be one or the other. We don't know yet. Most people like to know what's going on, rather than stepping out boldly in faith and praying to God and knowing that He'll get you through those difficult times and knowing that He'll help you with that goal is something that we should be reaching for in our faith, having the faith that Jonathan did. We're going to be here, and it's time for battle, time to go to war. He was willing to take it one step at a time and let God plan it out. Faith is willing to let God know the whole plan and to know our part one step at a time. Verses 16 through 23. Now Saul's watchmen in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went here and there. Saul said to the people who were with him, number now, and see who has gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. Then Saul said to Ahijah, bring the ark of God here, for the ark of God was at that time with the sons of Israel. While Saul talked to the priest, the commotion in the camp of the Philistines continued and increased. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was very great confusion. Now the Hebrews who were with the Philistines previously, who went up with them, all around in the camp, even they also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines had fled, even they also pursued them closely in the battle. So the Lord delivered Israel that day, and the battle spread beyond Beth-haven. Saul wonders, what's going on? What's going on in the campment of the Philistines? They eventually figure out, it's Jonathan. It's Jonathan and his armor-bearer, my king. And so they go and they gather themselves, they gather the troops that were scattered, and they go and they are given victory over the Philistines that day. A physical war, but one that has great spiritual implications for us. It took one person to step out of his comfort zone and say, I'm going to trust in God. He's going to show me the way, and He can show us all the way. And it comes the point when we have to rally behind those who lead us. You might not think yourself as having the grandest or the largest of faith capacity, but perhaps if someone steps out in front of you, you can be that encourager. We will be looking at 2 new elders next week to install them then. And they will become a part of this eldership here in this good congregation to lead us into the future. And it can take but one person, one of those men, or any of us here, to say, I trust in God enough to have faith in this endeavor for the work here at Birdwell's Chapel. Or maybe in your own life, stepping out in that faith, being yourself the leader. I don't know where we're going. I don't know what we're doing. But I know God can be with us the entire way. Lots of battles in the Old Testament. This just being one of them. And I hope that you can see the comparison to our spiritual lives today, because it was a spiritual life that got them through that physical war to overcome their enemies. We're all battling enemies ourselves. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy. And how are you doing on that battle? How are you doing on the battlefront with all your other enemies? I hope you're loving them. I hope you're working through the issues, perhaps whatever they might be, so that you might become the person God wants you to be. And He wants you to be a Christian. He wants you to be baptized and to be added to the body of Christ so that you might live a complete life on this earth. Come forward and let us assist you with that this evening. Or if you are a Christian in need of strength or forgiveness through prayer, let us assist you with that as well this evening. Please come forward now. Stand and sing.